Alright guys, I'm back. So on the last video we talked about adding and subtracting and their sign rules with integers. Today we're going to talk about the sign rules when we're multiplying and dividing. Now, when you're multiplying and dividing, you only have two questions. Just two. Last time we had three. This time we only have two. There are two questions that I want you to ask yourself. So two questions. Question one. Are my signs the same? So this means either both positive or both negative. So that's your first question. So are my signs the same? Either both positive or both negative. So let's look at an example. Let's say that I give you 4 times 2. Notice there's no sign in front of either one. And we talked about in the last video, that means that they're both positive. So this is a positive 4 and a positive 2. All right, now let's look in the other sense. Let's say I have negative 10 divided by negative 5. Now, one thing I want to go ahead and talk about while we're here is if you see it written like this, this is the same thing as negative 10 divided by negative 5. Okay? They mean the exact same thing. Sometimes they'll be written horizontally. Sometimes they'll be written as a fraction. These mean the same thing. So either way, these are the same. They both mean negative 10 divided by negative 5. So these are both negative. Okay? Now, granted, I did one multiplication and one division, but this is true. Doesn't matter which operation you're talking about. If your signs are the same, that's what you're asking yourself. Here I have 2 positives. Here I have 2 negatives. So if you can say yes, then you complete the operation, whether it's multiplication or division. And here's the important part, guys. Here is the important part. Doesn't matter if they're both positive or both negative. If they are both the same, then you complete the operation and your answer will always, notice I put it in all caps, will always be positive. Okay, your answer will always be positive. It doesn't matter if you started with 2 negatives. Those 2 negatives are going to cancel each other out. So 2 positives multiplied together gives you a positive. So this 4 times 2 is going to give you a positive 8. This negative 5 divided by, or this negative 10, divided by negative 5 is going to give you a positive 2. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. those negatives cancel each other out. Okay? So make sure that you remember that. That's going to come up again in just a little bit. So remember that 2 negatives are going to cancel each other out. Now, that doesn't mean yesterday we had something that looked like this. We had -6 minus 5. You have 2 negatives. They do not cancel each other out. They're not together. We are talking about with multiplication and division. So this is not the same. You can't bring multiplication and division in addition and subtraction. Okay? So that is not the same as this. So if in multiplication and division, if both your signs are the same, your answer will always be positive. So that's question 1. Now, question 2. All right. So question 2. Are my signs different? So this means, so what I mean here is meaning 1 positive and 1 negative. So that's my second and final question that I have to ask when I'm talking about multiplying and dividing. So let's say that I give you -12 divided by 4. And then let's say I give you 5 times -3. So those are my 2 examples for this one. I have -12 divided by 4, and I have 5 times -3. So if we talk about our signs, if we look at this -12, it's negative. I mean, we just said -12, so it's negative. Divided by 4, there's nothing here. That means it is positive. We talked about that last time. It stays the same here. Then we have 5, which is positive, times a -3. So I have a negative, I have a positive. I have a positive, I have a negative. Didn't mean to make the 3. Okay, so one's positive, one's negative. So right here, are my signs different? If you can say yes, then you complete your operation and your sign. Here's the other important part. I told you this is where the important part came from the last one. Here's the important part for this one. So if they're different, you complete the operation and your sign will always be negative. Okay? So if they're different, then the answer will always have a negative as its sign. So right here, -12 divided by 4. I'm going to complete that operation. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And because my signs are different, my answer will always be negative. So it is a -3. Over here, 5 times 3 is 15. Because my signs are different, my answer will always be negative. So it is a -15. And that's the only 2 things that you have to remember for multiplication and division. So shadow, sorry about our glare. Okay, those are the only 2 questions for multiplication and division. If your signs are the same, your answer is positive. If your signs are different, your answer is negative. Okay? That's the only thing that you have to remember for that. Now, I told you a minute ago, negatives cancel each other out. And I said, you need to remember that because we're going to use that again in a minute. And right here is where it's going to come into play. I didn't talk about it yesterday. It really goes with addition and subtraction, but I wanted to see if any of you remembered from last year or any years in the past, what do you do with this following thing? All right. Let's say that I give you something that looks like this. -5 minus a -10. I don't know how many of you remember in English, they always tell you you can't have a double negative. Same thing in math. We can't have a double negative. So what happens when you have a minus a negative? Don't know if you're answering me or not because I can't hear you right now. But hopefully you're saying the negatives cancel each other out. And they do. So anytime I have a negative with a negative, they have to be right here beside each other. They literally have to be basically touching. Okay? They become positives. So what you really have is -5 plus 10. You have to do that first before you can do what we did yesterday. So you have to answer your questions. Question 1, are both of my numbers positive? No. So question 1, both positive. No. Question 2, both negative. No. Question 3, different. So we have one positive and one negative. Yes. So this is my yes. So I have to follow the rules that go with question 3. And the rules that go with question 3 are you subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So I'm going to subtract these two. So 10 minus 5 is 5. And I keep the sign of the larger number. Well, because I know how to count, I know that 10 is bigger than 5. 10 is positive. Therefore, my answer is positive. So my answer is 5. If you ask yourself these 3 questions every single time you're looking at a problem, you will not get these wrong if you're paying attention. And it doesn't take you 2 seconds. You don't have to write them down like I did. Just answer them in your head. Are my signs both positive? Yes or no? Are my signs both negative? Yes or no? Are my signs different? Yes or no? And once you can say yes to one of these, you don't have to answer the rest of them. You stop there and you say, okay, what's my rule for that? And you go from there. Okay? So if you can remember those 3 questions to ask yourself and the rules that go with them, you will not get these wrong. But I wanted to make sure we talked about when you have 2 negatives beside each other, they do cancel each other out and they become a positive. But they literally have to be side by side. One can't be here and one over here. They have to be in the middle with each other, between the numbers. Okay? So that's what I was talking about a minute ago, that the 2 negatives were going to cancel out, but they have to be with each other. Okay? So this is one thing that I wanted to make sure I touched on this time. I'd waited because I wanted to see how many of you would remember it. So anyway, now, the next time we talk, we're going to be talking about some rational numbers. We're going to start talking about multiplying and dividing rationals. I'm going to talk about fractions first. We're going to do multiplying and dividing fractions, and then we're going to do multiplying and dividing decimals. I like to split them up that way, so we do fractions all in one day, and we do decimals all in one day. So that's it for this lesson. I'll see you for the next one. Get your work done, and make sure you remember these sign rules. They are very, very important.